I call the honourable member for Melbourne Port.
Thank you. Let me preface my remarks, Acting Speaker, by saying there's no one in this parliament who has more involvement, respect with Russian culture, literature than I do. We hold Victory Day to commemorate the great role that the Russian people played during the Second World War in my electorate every year with the Russian ambassador. And I have large Russian and Ukrainian communities in my electorate. I don't think, Acting Speaker, however, like other Australians, like the people who've made great contributions in the debate today, that I've ever been angrier about an international incident involving Australia than the MH17 tragedy. And I ask the hapless Russian ambassador, Morozov, Ambassador, please take a report to Moscow of this debate that's just taken place in this House and in the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition's remarks the other day. Again, this is evidence and a reminder that international politics can intrude into the lives of ordinary people carrying out their lives. In a global village, was it ever clearer that we can never adopt the attitude that Mr. Chamberlain once said of Czechoslovakia, it's a faraway place of which we know little. Of those nearly 300 people on MH17, most of them were in fact coming to Melbourne for holidays or an important international conference on AIDS or returning home from travelling to Europe. No one could have predicted the imperial delusions of Russia would directly lead to their deaths. Let's be frank about it, Acting Speaker. It's the Russian leadership who are responsible for this terrible tragedy, and it's President Mr. Putin in particular. How directly responsible he or his military are remains to be seen, but it's without a doubt he who sponsored and controlled the gangsters who shot this missile in eastern Ukraine who were responsible for this. The Leader of the Opposition said, and I think expressed the emotion of the Australian people when he said yesterday in the debate, "Let it be clear, I have the gravest reservations about welcoming to Australia anyone in the future who is engaged in this act of terror, and we will support in the strongest possible terms the reaction of the Australian government on this matter." Acting Speaker, Belarus has finally done something useful in providing a place where the Russian President Putin and Petro Poroshenko, the new Ukrainian ambassador, are meeting today in political developments that will help with discussions, hopefully avoid further conflict in that region. It's always good to attempt peace to prevent further tragedies like the MH17. Mr. Poroshenko being there at all is evidence that democracy is a common aspiration of all people, and that the fact that the Ukrainian people were able to hold an election in the middle of the military threats by Russia is a positive answer to such military aggression. It's because the Ukrainians have been increasingly successful in securing the autonomy of the Ukrainian state that Mr. Putin and Russia and the thugs of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic have employed such brutal tactics, such as using ground-to-air missiles that have altitudes that could hit civilian airliners flying at 35,000 feet. Let us be clear, such weapons systems are normally operated after several levels of sophisticated command and control are exercised, and only by nation-states, not by a group motley gang of brigands. So whether exercise of that missile system was exercised by Russian military people or not, whoever gave that weapon system to those people who shot those poor civilians down is to blame. I commend the Prime Minister for his behaviour during this crisis, obviously the Leader of the Opposition who I've quoted, and the AFP, the RAAF, the Governor-General and our colleagues in the Dutch government, including my friend the Dutch ambassador here. It's impossible not to say that Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has not done a good job, particularly at the Security Council, and it's great that the Australian police got to the crash site. I was very moved to hear that broad Aussie accent when I was overseas on CNN and the BBC talking about what needed to be done at the crash site. It's become obvious that this episode, after this episode, Australia needs an embassy in Ukraine. Australia is the 12th largest economy in the world, but ranks very poorly in terms of the number of diplomatic missions, markedly smaller than both the OECD and G20 average, with comparable populations. It's impossible to represent Kiev from Moscow. I commend the incredible hard work of our ambassador in Poland, Jean Dunn, who is responsible not only for Czechoslovakia and Hungary and Slovenia, but now has been responsible for our Australian embassy in Warsaw supervising Poland. I commend the Prime Minister on the proposal for the memorial garden, which I assume will be in the same place as our memorial for the victims of the Bali bombing. I commend this motion to the House, and I wish all the victims and their families that they should rest in peace and that their families should have good memories of them.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.